Hi, this is D.S. Yoxheimer. This is just another little edition of The Spectre. I'm just doing a quick, my kind of take and reaction about all of the different reactions and synopsises of the new Star Wars movie that I've heard and listened to. And the thing about Star Wars, and I think the history of the production of these movies, and now that it's changed hands from Lucasfilm to Disney, partly is George Lucas. I mean, the prequels were going to be made. I saw an old interview with Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill back in the 80s after Return of the Jedi, and they said there were going to be prequels, and they were intended to be made earlier, about basically Darth Vader and how he turned to the dark side, and the prequels wound up being made. Star Wars started to, at least it started the popularity and the fervor waned as as things do. I mean, it just happened. I remember I was a kid. I was around 10, 11, 12 years old. I saw that started to go away, and all that. I still love Star Wars, but and so, and then in the 90s there was kind of this resurgence. I mean, it's like it's like we can re-release these movies, the old movies, and add some things and digitally optimize them for the 90s, which is when they came out, and they added stuff, and they put a cut scene with like Jabba the Hutt. I think that's one of the more dramatic changes, and they changed the Jabba the Hutt scene, the musical number by from the Max Rebo band, and they animated it, which I hated because I liked the movies the way they were. And I think they are better. Of course, they made Han shoot first, Han shot Guido first. That was a big thing. And I think this was the beginning of really fans getting very critical of what they loved, because George Lucas came back and changed everything, and they were critical of The Phantom Menace. And when I went to go see The Phantom Menace, I was like in my mid-20s. So I didn't, and at that point I didn't know they were going to make prequels so long ago. I didn't know they were going to make them early on, or there was a plan to make them early on. So so when I saw the Phantom Menace, it was like, okay, there's I mean, it's the beginning of it. So I kind of gave it a pass, even though I really there was only a few things I really liked about it, which is like the lightsaber battle. I mean, I liked the scenery. I liked some of the effects. I didn't, of course, like who, Jar Jar Binks. And the second and the third one were a little bit better, but of course there are definitely things about those films that I found, I wasn't crazy about, but I sort of watched them. I just enjoyed it. It's like, okay, it's Star Wars movie. But I thought there was definitely a lot of, the cinematography looked beautiful, and I began to enjoy some of the plot and not all of it, but I didn't, at times I did discuss it with people, and we talked about it and whatnot. I think some of the synopsises and some of the criticisms of it are kind of funny and comical over the years. But after that, like, basically, okay, they made the prequels. That was something that he was intending upon doing. And George Lucas famously once said in an interview that there's going to be no more movies or adventures with Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo, and Chewbacca, and the droids. And that was his thing. Until, of course, he sold it to Disney. Because there's still money to be made, and the fans want to see more Star Wars movies. And even though the newer movies, when The Force Awakens was released, fans seemed to like it more. But, of course, they had their criticisms about it. Mine was I don't know where they found Luke's sword. It somehow wound up at that intergalactic bar, and Rey finds it. So, and she gives it to Luke at the end. And I think it's okay. I mean, I'm not, I mean, I enjoyed the movie. It didn't get me, revved up and fired up. the Force, the Last Jedi, which I don't even know who's the Last Jedi. Rey has powers. Princess Leia has powers. She used it to get, rescue herself when she was in space, and she did sort of the, as a lot of people are referring to, the Mary Poppins, she just like floats across space. And of course we all thought she was going to be killed off because Carrie Fisher is now, she passed away and she's now one with the Force, whatever you want to call it. And spoilers, there's some spoilers. Luke winds up dying because he astral projects himself sort of like to go and confront Kylo Ren and give everybody enough time to get out of that base. If you've seen it, I'm not doing a whole overall analysis of the film. I'm just sort of talking about why fans are still so after all this time they're just so fucking critical, and they get they sort of almost take it sort of personally, like the filmmaker didn't have any respect for them as fans. And I don't really know what they want. I mean, the thing about these movies, I never needed to see another Star Wars movie personally after Jedi wrapped. Like when I was a kid, I saw that movie came out when I was 9 years old, and after it was over, I thought that was over. They defeated the Empire. The Death Star blew up, and Darth Vader was burning on the pyre there, and it was over. But his grandson, who and there's this whole, you don't see him get raised, you don't know how Han and Leia fucked him up or anything like that. But his grandson, became a Sith Lord, and which I don't even know if they mentioned Sith Lord all that much in this movie. But they don't mention midi-chlorians either. I guess the directors decided they didn't, which I wouldn't care if they mentioned it. I mean, it's part of the official canon, so whatever. But these movies never, they're being made because of this, because there's a buck to be made. Let's be honest. I mean, I love Star Wars, but it's a very commercial franchise, and that's why they made it. I mean, it could have been ended a long time ago. They could have made the prequels probably in the early 90s, I think. That would have been a good time to make those movies. George Lucas, I think by the time he got to making them in the late 90s, like they should have started making them in like 1987 or 88, and put them into production, and they could have played out into the 90s. And I think that they would have been better. That's just my theory. You wouldn't have had like the Phantom Menace. It wouldn't be called the Phantom Menace, which is such a shitty name. But I think it would have been better. He could have collaborated with some other directors to direct some of them, and George Lucas could have overseen the basic vision of what he wanted for those films. And that could have been it. But these movies were not. This is just basically, I mean, it's almost, and I won't compare it to like a Friday the 13th franchise or Halloween or anything like that. But the reason they made Friday the 13th, movies, and continually made them no matter how bad they were, is because they were cheap to make, and they were usually almost always profitable. So they always made their money back, and with some profit, and a lot of those films. So that's why they made them. And these movies aren't horrible, like a lot of the sequels to Friday the 13th and Halloween. Even though I enjoy those cheesy bad movies a great deal, these movies are I would say the new movies, and to some I will say the prequels have their merits. They're cool. I mean, they're popcorn movies. You're just supposed to go basically and enjoy it. It's to just basically escape, some of your everyday life a little bit for a couple hours. That's what, those kinds of movies are for. Are there things, during when I was watching the Last Jedi, were there things that I was like, there were things that kind of, it's not every square inch of it's going to be fucking perfect. I mean, that's the thing. But a lot of it was good. Most of it, to me, it held me. I paid attention the entire time. It had my attention. I felt like I was on a ride, like a good Star Wars movie. That's where I think it succeeded. There's some things in it that you can go online and watch a lot of videos and reaction videos and things like that where they discuss all the flaws. but I think it did a pretty good job of, I mean, they do lay on a lot of nostalgia, like when R2, who seems to only reactivate when Luke's around, played the hologram of Princess Leia's original message from A New Hope, and all of that stuff, and of course the Millennium Falcon. It's just this. These films seem to really rely heavily on that. I mean, they killed off Han, because maybe Harrison Ford didn't want to do another movie. Maybe that's really what they wanted to do. But I think it would almost been worse for fans maybe if, like, Chewbacca had been killed or the Millennium Falcon had been destroyed. Who knows? But the Millennium Falcon is basically this one of the symbols of the Rebel fleet, of the Rebel Alliance. It's the Resistance in this, but basically it's one of the elements in the movie that has, carried, except for, well, it had a brief, I think, appearance in one of the prequels, like you see it way in the distance, and it's tiny and it's landing in a spaceport, but it's iconic in all the movies, so it just basically has to be there. And they just basically, I mean, Harrison Ford just kind of waltzed on in and collected a paycheck. I'm not saying he was terrible in it or anything like that, but it didn't, and like, it was cool. Hey, Han's back for most of the movie, and but that's kind of my take on it. I mean, if you don't, it's hard to be critical. I mean, if you look at the old movies, there's things in those movies that are silly and flawed, but they all work. Basically, a lot of it works. It's like, I mean, of course, like when Luke goes to Dagobah and meets Yoda. Yoda's just this little alien troll that lives in a swamp on a swamp planet, and that's who teaches him how to use the Force. And Yoda's a little fucked up and crazy too. He's like a crazy old man, but he's wise at the same time. So you're not. I mean, Luke's probably not too certain of him at certain points, and he's even busting his balls in this movie when he shows back up in spirit form and on the island. And in this movie, he looks more like the Yoda from Empire Strikes Back too. I won't say that, but in conclusion, like, I mean, a Star Wars movie to me is just, you just basically, you go in the movie theater, the lights go down, and you're there to escape. Unless it's really horrifically bad, like I would say 75 to 80, maybe 85% of the Phantom Menace was, then yeah, I would say definitely pound your fist and really give the director, who, well, he's not directing it anymore. And I would be cool if George Lucas was involved with these movies, but he sold his rights to it and for billions of dollars, and he doesn't need to be. I mean, he's done with it. But that's what those movies are kind of for. They're just, to me, that's what they're for. And it's not as bad as seeing like a Transformers movie sequel or something like that, where the plot just gets completely decimated with all of the action and explosions and transforming robots and all that, and basically TNA. So yeah, but that's my that's really how I think. I mean, if you want to just go, I mean, if you're a Star Wars fan, you sort of have the ability to just sink into your seat and just enjoy it, versus and kind of let it flow over you a little bit, instead of nitpicking every little fucking thing, which they do, which gets very annoying too. And I understand the criticisms. I think they made some really good videos that I watched online. Some of them really entertaining, but I love The Last Jedi. I thought it was great. I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought Mark Hamill's send-off in it was proper. I'm not saying I would have done things, probably differently if I was directing the movie, but I would give it my blessing. And this has been my take on The Last Jedi, basically the Star Wars trilogy, and I think how to look at it maybe, or just you know, understand that it's not really a film critic movie in a way. It's more of a it's a children's movie. It's a popcorn movie. It's kind of one of those types of flicks, and I think only one of them was done very badly, and that was The Phantom Menace, and the other two kind of limped along. But I mean, as far as like Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, but and I love Rogue One too. I really like that film. But that's my take on it. My name is D.H. Yuxheimer. This is another edition of The Spectre. You have a great new year. Hope you're enjoying your holiday. Take care.